Welcome. My name is Claire Culwell, and I am so excited that you are joining me today for my podcast called To Be Bold. When I thought about having a podcast, I thought about the ways that I had to step out of my comfort zone for things that matter throughout my life. My birth mother motivated me to step out of my comfort zone when she shared with me that I had survived her abortion that successfully took the life of my twin. And I knew that day that I never wanted to see the tears that I saw in her eyes, in the eyes of anyone else. And so I chose to boldly step out of my comfort zone for something that mattered to me. And so I want to be able to share stories with you, stories of people, ordinary people just like me, people just like you, who are really doing that, who are stepping out of their comfort zone for things that matter, who are being bold in their stance for things that are good, who are speaking truth in love. And I want that to be an encouragement to you today. I hope that it will motivate you as you live life in your family, in your community. And I hope that it will motivate you to be bold enough to stand up, to step out of your comfort zone for things that truly matter today. I hope you enjoy. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for my podcast called To Be Bold. I am excited to be highlighting individuals who are stepping out boldly for things that matter, stepping out of their comfort zone for things that are truly affecting our country, our families, our lives. And so I'm honored to be joined today by my good friend, Christina Bennett. Welcome, Christina.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wow, you have quite the accomplishments. I'm excited to dive into what got you to where you are today. But first, congratulations on being a mother. I know that
you
are fostering to adopt, and you're feeding your little boy right now. And
yes.
So I'd love to just, first, just tell us a little bit about that. What brought you to the place of fostering? You and your husband are excited to be hopefully adopting. I don't know the full story, but tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. So I have a little 7-month-old. I can't show his face or share his name because he's not adopted yet, but you'll probably hear him after he finishes his bottle. You'll probably hear him making noise. I've always had a heart, to adopt. I mean, not always, but I think at least the last 10, 15 or so years, I've had a heart to adopt. And I've seen multiple friends in the pro-life movement choose adoption. And I've always wanted to do that. I wasn't sure exactly what my journey would look like. I ended up getting married in my, early 30s. I think I was like 32 when I got married. And I really didn't know what my life would look like, but I knew I wanted children right away. And so we actually tried, we never in any way, tried to prevent children. We were open to them from the moment we got married, but I didn't know that I had endometriosis. And I really do partly blame this on just the culture that we live in, and even just, abortion and birth control, and how birth control is often like offered as the quick fix for everything, because I had just the worst, pain growing up. And I was even hospitalized multiple times in my youth. And all I was ever offered was birth control as an option. And I did take it temporarily when I was 15, and then I got off of it. It didn't help. But then even into my early 30s, when I was married, I accidentally, it wasn't an accident. I just didn't know. I went to an OBGYN that was an abortion doctor. I didn't know because she didn't share that she did abortions. Mm-hmm. But when I had told her about my symptoms, and at this point I was trying to get pregnant, I was married trying to get pregnant. And when I told her about my symptoms, she had offered birth control. And I actually, at that point, I told her how I wasn't okay with that because of, the history of Margaret Sanger and how she really used birth control as a means to try to limit the Black population. And I explained how uncomfortable I was with all of that. And she was very rude to me. She actually said, that I was being foolish because of my principles, but she never helped me in any other way. So she just told me I was being foolish because of my principles, but she did not tell me anything helpful. So it took a pro-life stenographer at the pregnancy center that I was working for. Her name is Carrie, and she's a ultrasound tech, a sonographer. And she was like, you need to get an ultrasound. So to make a long story short, she really pushed me to get an ultrasound. They found out that I had fibroids and endometriosis. I ended up going into having a surgery, which changed my life. I mean, the surgery really changed my life because now most months I'm pain-free and I haven't been to the hospital since. After that, I did get pregnant, and that was a miracle. My first and only time getting pregnant. But unfortunately, we had a miscarriage. And so after that happened, I think that was in 2018. And after that happened, we were just praying about which direction to take. I saw my boss when I worked at the Pregnancy Resource Center at Molly. I saw her go through DCF, which is the state organization here, and I saw her do adoption through the state. And I was really moved by just the whole process and how it worked for her. And she did foster to adopt, and so I ended up actually hearing my baby is very strong. He's like picking up something on the thing. I ended up hearing an ad on the radio coming home from work, working at the Family Institute, about therapeutic adoption, which is like children that have more special needs and everything else. And I ended up calling the program and talking to a social worker. And long story short, for the first time ever in Connecticut, they ended up having it's called like a weekend to remember or a lifetime to remember. And it was a weekend where they offered like 80% of the required Department and Children Family classes in one weekend. They had never done it before, but it was a new thing they were doing because they realized that they weren't able to have as many adoptions, as many foster families as they wanted to, just because of the fact that people were so busy, they weren't able to sit and take like a 15-week class. So they were like, why don't we offer it in a weekend, and then we can get more people signed up to be foster and adoptive parents. So we got chosen. There's only like 50 families in the whole state of Connecticut. We were one of the families chosen. My husband and I, we went away to this it was like a spa hotel. Not that the state has money for that, but the hotel just offered to do that. They offered to host the foster adoptive families and the social worker. So it was really amazing. And we ended up getting like the majority of our classes finished. And then after that, we just finished them the regular way. And then we were licensed and just waiting to get matched. And we got a couple of matches, but we said yes to them. And they didn't pan out. Like they ended up going with family members or different things, which is great because that's always the best option if that's possible. And then after that, I was flying to California to speak at a pregnancy center event at the beginning of like the COVID stuff. And it was crazy because as soon as I got off the plane, the host was like, the event's canceled. Like the governor shut it down. So I flew all the way to California and then it was canceled. But it was still worth it. Like I got to hang out with the staff and go to the center and everything else. Well, when I was flying on the plane, I was watching a movie called Foster, which is all about the foster care system in LA. And I'm bawling my eyes out, crying, God, please, like, we've been waiting for so long for a match. Like, I'm ready to be a foster mom. And I'm watching the movie crying. Well, at that very moment, the social worker called my husband, Sean, with this baby and, said that he was a match for us. And so we ended up getting placed with him. And, as soon as I got back, from California, it was just a short time after that he came to our door. He was like a week old. And now we've had him for 7 months. And he's just like the sweetest baby. He's very strong. He's very wild. He's got a lot of energy. But we've had him the whole time. And yeah, so we're on the process to adopting him. I can't give all the details about his story, but I can say that, he doesn't have any, there's no bio parents in the situation that we know of. So because of that, it's going to be a little bit of an easier process, but at the same time, because of COVID, everybody in Connecticut, and I'm guessing probably across the country, we're dealing with much slower adoptions. The courts are only taking emergency cases, and adoptions are not considered to be emergencies. So I have friends that have been waiting for one of my friends has been waiting for 2 years. I have other friends that are waiting as well, but they're doing the best that they can. It's just COVID. So that's the difficulty. But one of the blessings in that is that my husband and I have both been able to be home and work from home for 7 months. So normally, I actually wasn't 100% sure what it would look like. So I didn't know when the baby would come or the child, because we were open to a baby, and then we were open to older children, like up to 8. And so I didn't know when, and I was kind of wondering, like, well, what's going to happen, like, with my speaking schedule? What's going to happen with work? We'll figure it out kind of when we get to it. And then what happened was everything shut down, and so I didn't have to really worry about it, because I didn't have any more speaking events. I didn't have to go into the office. My husband didn't have to go into the office. So it ended up being a blessing in a sense, because we've been able to be home the whole time. So that's kind of our story. And yeah, we still, I'm still trying to have biological children too. And I also would love to adopt more children as well. So, because I want him to have brothers and sisters, but I don't know what that'll look like. So I'm just taking it one day at a time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. It's interesting, because I tell people all the time that God has always seen the bigger picture when I don't. And I feel like you just described that perfectly, as you had these plans that how you would start your family, and God said, I have this specific child for you. And he's there, we can hear him. It's just always neat. As you know, I'm adopted, and so I appreciate so much people that are willing to adopt children and give us homes. And I know that he will grow up just knowing how loved he is. So anyway, thanks for sharing that with us. So, Christina, you have stepped out boldly in prayer and through pro-life work for the past 15 years. And I know that there's a story that you found out about your own birth story and how your life is a miracle. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about that with our listeners today, and just the journey that God has taken you on, where you've been willing and able to step out boldly for things that matter, especially when it comes to pro-life issues.
Sure. Yeah. So I just really didn't have strong opinions on abortion. I didn't really know much about abortion. I grew up in Connecticut, where I'm at now, and it's a very pro-abortion state. My family, I would say for the most part, they would say they're pro-choice, and it's not like a political issue that we talk about. It's not an issue that ever came up in my home. And it's not actually anything that ever came up in church either, just because it's not very common, unless like in the Catholic circles. But in the Protestant churches, it's not very common. In the Black churches, it's not very common for pastors to talk about abortion. So I've never heard abortion talked about growing up in church or in my family, only at school. Or like if my girlfriends were getting abortions, because in Connecticut, you don't have to tell your parents. So like in high school, some of my girlfriends got abortions, and just like something they were hiding from their parents. And that was, the extent of it. So when I was in college, my mom confessed to scheduling to abort me and walking out of her appointment. And it wasn't like my mom was trying to tell me that story. She would have never told me that story. She had no intention of telling me that story. But somebody at church had approached me and said, God wants you to know something remarkable happened around the time of your birth. So I asked my mom, what happened that was remarkable, around that time? And she said she met an angel and she didn't want to talk about it, which I thought was like so weird for my mom. She's never said anything like that before, but she was serious. Like she was like, I don't want to talk about it. So I was like, okay. So I was involved in a campus ministry, Campus Crusade for Christ. So I went away to Kentucky on a summer missions trip, and I've journaled since I was 9 years old. So I journaled, and I was just like, I don't know what my mom's talking about, like an angel, like what does she mean by that? But, when I get back home to Connecticut after this summer mission trip, I'm going to ask her. So I pretty much cornered her in the bathroom when I got back from my ministry trip. And I was like, Mom, like, you have to tell me, like, what are you talking about? She's like, you would hate me. Like, I can't tell you, you'd hate me. And then she opened up and shared that she tried to abort me, that my dad had 2 kids already and he didn't want another child and he's putting the pressure on her. And she went to Mount Sinai Hospital, Hartford, Connecticut. At the time, they were a Jewish hospital. They were doing abortion. Since then, they've merged with St. Francis, which is a Catholic hospital. So there are no abortions, thank God. But at the time in 1981, they were doing abortions. And so she went to get an abortion and she was by herself. But the angel that she met was a janitor, an African-American janitor who was just mopping the floor. And she saw my mom crying after my mom met with a counselor. And she just asked her if she wanted to have her baby. And my mom said yes. And that encounter with that woman gave her the strength. Like when the doctor called her name and she went into his office, there's blood on the floor from the abortion. She was super disgusted by it. And she was like, I'm leaving. And my mom has a hard time, even today, I would say, she's very kind, generous, sensitive, loving. She does have a hard time saying no, being assertive, doesn't come naturally to her. So it really took that woman, that she encountered, whether it was a janitor or an angel, just the right person at the right time, to give my mom that strength. And God gave her that strength because the doctor tried to convince her to stay. He was like, you've already paid for this. You're just nervous. You're going to get through this. And she was like, no, I'm keeping my baby. No. And she ran out. And that was the Lord. Like that was the Lord's strength. And so she's just amazing. She ran out. She didn't plan on telling me at all, ever. And then when that person from church gave me that word that something remarkable had happened, I think she felt like, okay, I can't hide it anymore. Now, she had no clue. And oh my God, it's just so funny because, I had never met a pro-life person in my life. When I heard this story, I didn't know any pro-life activists. I didn't know pro-life ministries. So I was so disconnected. So her telling me that story was a beautiful story that I was just like, wow, God, that's a beautiful story. I feel really grateful. I instantly felt like God had saved my life. I felt very grateful, but there was no and now I'm going to go take this story into the pro-life ministry. Not at all. I was going to school to be a communications major. I had plans and I had different dreams. But all I can say is that God arrested me. God arrested me. I met a man named Lou Engle, who was a preacher from California. I was still in college, and I was visiting a church nearby. He came to speak at the church. I had never heard anyone talk about abortion. This was early 2000s, and he talked about abortion. I went right up, and it was right after I had found out my mom's story. So I went up to him, and I was like, hey, I just want to encourage you. I just found out that I was supposed to be aborted and my mom walked out. So look at God's answering prayers even when you don't realize it. I just want to tell you that story and encourage you. And then he invited me to go to an event. There were these huge, massive prayer gatherings called the Calls, and they were all across the country. And this one was in Texas. I think it was 2001, I think. And he invited me to go to the Call, Texas, and to share my testimony. All these kind of prophetic Protestant charismatic people there, like Jim Gall and worship leaders like Jason Upton, this, kind of stream that they were in. And I went, and I never got to share my story because it was crazy and so many people were speaking. I never got to share my story. But at that moment, I felt like there's a scripture in the Bible where Paul, the apostle, talks about follow me as I follow Christ. At that moment, I felt like I have to follow this man as he follows Christ. And he had given himself completely to like doing pro-life work. So I was like, okay. And, it didn't happen right away. It wasn't like I just left that meeting and I was like all the way. And I still had to finish school and everything else. But I finished school. And then in 2005, which was, I worked, like I started stuff at home in Connecticut. Like I ended up starting a pro-life group in Connecticut called Stand for Life. We started going to the abortion clinics and praying at the clinics, and talking in churches in Connecticut. So, there was some time between when I met Lou and then graduating college and everything else. But in 2005, I moved to Washington, D.C., and then I never looked back. I moved to Washington, D.C. to be a full-time prayer missionary for the ending of abortion, to pray in front of the Supreme Court with tape on my mouth that said life, and with a group called Bound for Life. And they have these bracelets that I still wear to this day. You probably can't see it, but it's a red band and it says life on it. And there's a 22-word prayer that goes along with it, which is, Jesus, I plead your blood over my sins and the sins of my nation. God, end abortion and send revival to America. So basically, for the past 15, 16 years, there's been a group of people praying that prayer with life tape for 16 years in front of the Supreme Court, specifically praying for pro-life justices on the Supreme Court to end abortion. So, I was there in D.C. for a few years. Then I moved to Atlanta, and then I moved back to Connecticut. But that was really the point for me where I was like, no going back. Like, I'm all the way in. Like, I will be a pro-life, I don't know what, missionary activist, like, for the rest of my life. And I have been. And now it's 15 years later.
Wow. It's incredible. I mean, I just keep going back to this. God saw the bigger picture when you didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the right spot at the right time. He gave you the story, wrote that story perfectly for your life. I tell people a lot that about my story. When I met my birth mother, I had no idea, like you, what was going on in our country in regards to abortion. My eyes were opened and I couldn't turn back. I couldn't be silent anymore. And so it's encouraging because I know that the voice of someone like you, and just your story, your existence, that it speaks volumes for why we care about what is happening in our country in regards to abortion. So thanks for sharing that. Earlier you mentioned just kind of the history of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, kind of what the goal was when Planned Parenthood population. Can you kind of go back and just tell us a little bit about that? Tell us about how abortion and just what kind of conversations you've had with people about that, specifically in the African American population, because I'm curious. I mean, I can have a conversation with someone, but I feel like you, being an African American woman who has this compelling story, who has been on the front lines, know what's working, knows what's not. I feel like you have had opportunities where you've really seen eyes opened and hearts changed in regards to abortion. So could you go back and tell us a little bit more of the history and just what's happening currently in the African American population in regards to abortion?
Sure, absolutely. So I learned about the history of abortion in the Black community when I was in D.C. The first Black pro-lifer I ever met was a man named Will Ford. And he's awesome. He's still pro-life to this day. He's in Texas, like him and his wife de Havilland. And when I met him, he had a personal story of having an abortion, paying for one for his girlfriend in college. He really helped open my eyes to the history of, Planned Parenthood. And I learned about Margaret Sanger, who founded the American Birth Control League, which later then became Planned Parenthood. And she had something called the Negro Project, where she hired Black ministers. She paid them money to preach about birth control outside of tent revivals. So people would go to church tent revivals outside, and after they would leave, they would get literature about birth control. Margaret Sanger, her parents had many children, and I think she had just grown bitter watching her mom have so many children. And she had this elite mentality that, certain people groups like Black people, disabled people, people of color, that they would burden society, that they would cause society to, be worse off if they had higher populations. You'll see now that Planned Parenthood is trying to move away from Sanger's legacy. For a long time, they denied the fact that she was a racist, that, she believed in eugenics. They said, oh, everybody in that time was like that. They really kind of downplayed her responsibility when it came to the things that she said. I mean, just really evil things, talking about African Americans like weeds that should be exterminated, wanting birth control to be in the water supply, wanting there to be a baby code and people to only be allowed to have so many children. I mean, really, I think any person, if you watch her interviews, there's an interview with her on YouTube where they ask her, does she believe in sin? And she says, the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world, delinquents, that are marked when they're born. So she was not a pleasant woman by any means. And I think it's very clear when you're able to watch the few interviews that she did. It's probably why Planned Parenthood doesn't like quoting her. But even now, they're trying to move away from her. They're trying to rename their New York building and take her name off of it because they recognize, her racist history. But for a long time, and even in totality, they still have not done that. So when I learned about that and how it wasn't just history, that, her evil plan, the roots of that evil plan were still bearing fruit today, that there are more Black abortions than ever, that there's over 16 million African-American children that have died, that, 78 or more percent of the abortion clinics are in lower income minority neighborhoods. So to me, it wasn't just history, because there's a lot of evil history with racism in America. But I could see that the things that happened back in the day, that they set the stage for what's happening right now. So when it comes to me talking with other Black people about these issues, I've had a lot of people that have been very receptive. We have a Black pro-life women's group that obviously I'm in the National Black Pro-Life Coalition, but we also have a Facebook group specifically for Black pro-life women. There's over 200 women in there. And some of these women are very, very devoted, very dedicated people to the pro-life cause. Personally, my story has really helped me to connect with a lot of people because they know that I don't have an agenda. I didn't grow up in this movement. I'm not doing it for any ulterior motives. Unfortunately, sometimes people think with pro-lifers that there's got to be some kind of ulterior motive. And I think they know with me that this is just my story. This is just who I am. So I am able to connect, through that way. I've seen women, Black women, I've seen them choose life. When I worked at the pregnancy center, there's one woman who, she went to Planned Parenthood 9 times. And 9 times they blew her off. They were like, oh, the doctor's not in. Oh, we have to reschedule your appointment. The 10th time she came to our pregnancy center, she had an ultrasound. She saw her baby, and now she has a beautiful baby boy. I have another young Black girl that I mentor who, even on my birthday, which was on October 13th, she said on Facebook to me, you've been there with me since I was a wild person, and now I'm a mom. And, she has a beautiful baby girl that I helped her walk through the process of that. And I remember there was a time when this guy is so strong. I'm in my bedroom and I'm on my vanity, and he's literally like knocking over all of my makeup and stuff. He's just so strong. But anyway, it's a blessing that he's so strong. So I've seen women, choose life. I've gone outside of abortion clinics and talked to women and seen them walk away. I've had the sad experience of women telling me, I wish, like I had a girl who she was there with her friend to get an abortion, but she was like, I wish that you were there when I was here, when I was at this abortion clinic years before. My mom pushed me to go and I had an abortion. I wish that you were there to talk to me. So I have had really sad moments where I've worked with women and I've seen them choose abortion even after ultrasounds. And so I've kind of experienced it all, the people who write me off because I'm pro-life, that I'm not like woke enough for them, or, I've even had people think that I'm being discriminatory towards my own people group. There's a Black abortion group called Sister Song. And one of the things that they say is that for those of us that are Black, that, that talk about abortion, that we're shaming people in our community, that we're shaming women, that Black women need to have their own, autonomy and make their own decisions. And I understand why they think that, because obviously we live in a world where all we've ever known is abortion. Those of us that are, been born after 73. But at the same time, I've seen the way that abortion, it's okay, baby. I've seen the way that abortion hurts women. I've seen the way that abortion hurts men and hurts the Black community. And we really, we're in a time where we can't take this lightly, especially going into the elections where, the Hyde Amendment is on the table. And, you have people like Joe Biden who says they want to get rid of the Hyde Amendment. Well, that means that government funds, more money is going to go towards abortion for low-income women, which means more pressure. Because when a woman is, considering abortion, if her boyfriend or her partner knows it's free, he's like, come on, let's go get this done. Like, we can just build a state. And she doesn't even have the ability to say no, make an excuse or make a lie and say, I have to, I don't have the money or whatever else. And doctors know that, hey, they can just say, we'll build a state. And so I can't even imagine, God forbid, if the Hyde Amendment was to be gone, the kind of abortion expansion that would happen in the Black community. And we're already in a crisis. So, thankfully, I have had really good experiences sharing my story, connecting with people in the Black community. I am a conservative. I'm a Republican because of the pro-life issue. That's why I joined the Republican Party, specifically because I wanted to be able to work with people who are pro-life. And in Connecticut, like, the Democrats are literally trying to shut down the pregnancy centers. Most of them are, at least, that's a part of the party agenda on the local level. So, but even with that, for a Black person to join the Republican Party, to be a conservative, oftentimes you are ostracized. Like, you are, you burn the bridge. Like, people think you've thrown away your Black card. Like, but even still, I still am able to have relationships and, with my peers, with people in the Black community. Not everybody loves me, but I'm still able to build bridges. And I just think that that's the Lord's grace, and that somehow people can see that I'm authentic. And also, I just think being kind to people helps as well, because I am not the type of person that's ever going to demean the Black community. I can talk about these issues without talking about our community in a way that is shameful or demeaning. So that's very important to me, is to speak the truth in love, and to speak the truth without being unnecessarily offensive, because the truth is offensive enough already. Mm-hmm. For me to say I'm pro-life is offensive enough already. For me to say I'm a Republican is offensive enough already. So I don't need to be mean or caustic or snarky or petty. I can just speak the truth in love and kindness. And some people will reject it, but other people will hear it. And thankfully, I've had a lot of people that are willing to listen, and that's a blessing.
Yeah, speaking the truth in love it's the only way that I have found that's effective. And I imagine oftentimes if there had been someone like you, Christina, in my birth mother's time of need, in her moment of crisis, telling her that she's worth it, that she could do it, that she could be a mother, I wonder what would have been different for her. I wonder if, my twin would be sitting next to me, or just what the bigger picture would have been. I know that God, like he wrote your story perfectly, he wrote my story perfectly. And so I don't ever question that. But I appreciate when people can have a healthy conversation, a truthful conversation, but in a loving way, like you mentioned. So thanks for sharing that. I want to just hear briefly. We'll wrap up. I know sweet baby boy's getting tired of you being on the phone.
He's got a lot of things to throw and play with. So I don't know. When I get off the phone, I'll see there's probably like makeup smeared everywhere, but no, he's having fun.
He's just having fun. He's just playing a game, Mom.
He sure is.
You got to meet President Trump. He invited you to the Oval Office with a few other pro-life leaders. What was that experience like for you?
Well, it was awesome. It was really a divine moment because the timing of it was just so crazy. What had happened was, it was just a day after a really difficult situation in Connecticut. So we were fighting for the pregnancy centers for the last couple of years. The local party, Democratic Party, has brought up pregnancy centers of false advertising, saying that they have, they're fake clinics and they don't really help women and they're lying to women. And so I had testified before the Public Health Committee about the pregnancy centers, and one of the chairs on the committee, his wife is on the board of NARAL, which is the pro-abortion group. Mm-hmm. And he's also got their highest award. And so during my 3-minute testimony, I expressed that I really didn't feel like we were getting a fair trial because of his connections. And just the fact that I brought up his wife being on NARAL, everyone mad at me, on the Public Health Committee. And they're mostly, at the time opposed to us, although now we've gained some ground. And so they were just saying all these things to me, like I was out of line and I was being inappropriate and I shouldn't have brought up his wife. And one of them said, I need to do unto others as they would do unto me. All of this as they're literally lying about the pregnancy centers and trying to shut them down. But, so I was kind of discouraged after that. And I just thought, wow, it's very difficult being pro-life in Connecticut. They don't take us seriously at the Capitol. Our voices are not being heard. They're literally lying about us. And I went home and I was discouraged. But one of my friends from England was praying for me. And he was like, Christina, God wants you to know that your voice will be heard. You're not going to be silenced. And so the next day I woke up and I was ready to go back to work. And even though it was difficult, I was ready to get back at it. And my boss was like, hey, are you on your way in? And I was like, yeah, it was snowing. So I was a little slow to get in. And he was like, the White House just called and they want you to come. Now, the crazy thing was they wanted me to come. I had to fly in that day. So I just, I ended up just packing up everything and, jumping on a plane and going to the White House. And I was there with Melissa, my friend, our mutual friend, Melissa Odin. And it was just a beautiful experience. I got to meet Pastor Paula White and her husband. There was so many people that were just buzzing around the room. Kellyanne Conway, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And the staff had told us, they're here because of you guys, because they value you as pro-lifers. They want to be around because you're here. And the contrast was night and day. The way that I was treated in Connecticut was, I was just not listened to, they were being rude to me, just really not valuing my voice as a pro-lifer. And then to go to the White House a day later and for them to treat us like royalty, for them to, treat us like we're such important people just because we're pro-life. We don't have anything to offer. I'm not an elected official or a celebrity or anything else, just a normal person. But they were so kind. The president was so kind. He was talking with us, laughing with us. There was children there. He was, laughing with the children. So funny. The baby knocked this over, but you know what? I'll show you what it is. It's a beautiful picture that someone got for me when I was waiting on the Lord for a child. And it says, for this child I have prayed, and the Lord has granted me what I've asked for. So,
that's so sweet.
It's really sweet. My friend gave me that. She was praying. My friend fasted a year for me. She didn't have ice cream. I think it was like for a year or something. She was praying for me to have a baby.
That's so sweet.
But anyway, it was just a beautiful experience. And I was nervous, of course. I was like, I can't believe I'm going into the White House, like the Oval Office. And it was really kind of nerve-wracking, but everyone was so kind. And even afterward, we got to go to the Roosevelt Room. We got to pray together. And it was a really beautiful experience. And then I actually also had the pleasure of going to the RNC, the last night of the RNC, and getting to hear the president's speech. So I always tell people, I know that there's a lot of different opinions, strong opinions about the president. Obviously, we know that we're in a very divided country, and people have strong opinions about the president. But for me, my experience is I can only speak for myself. Every encounter I've had with the White House staff, with every phone call. Right now, I'm on the board as a co-chair for the Pro-Life Voices for Trump. So I'm working with people that are very connected in the White House. Has been pleasant, has been wonderful, has been a great experience. So I am, excited about casting my vote for President Trump, and I'm excited about what he's done in giving us 3 Supreme Court justices. It's just amazing. And over 200 lower court judges, as well as, his promise to protect the Hyde Amendment, to defund Planned Parenthood even more than he's done in the past, cutting $50-60 million from them, but he's promised to do more. So I'm excited about that. And it definitely, there's a cost that comes from being vocal like that and supporting the president. And even in my own family, I've had to pay that cost and be ridiculed and mocked and misunderstood. But at the end of the day, it does matter, but it doesn't matter as much as what's happening to the unborn and, how they're being dismembered and discarded. And, that could have been the both of us. Nobody would have known our names. Nobody would have seen our faces. We wouldn't have had a family. We wouldn't be able to call each other friends. We would have been, to be blunt, we would have been medical waste, just thrown away, nameless, faceless. And God would have obviously, we would have been with the Lord, but the Lord doesn't create people just so they could be thrown away to come back to him. He creates people for a purpose. They can live out their purpose on the earth and live the life that God has called them to. So, it's a miracle. We have what I would call a divine responsibility. It's not an obligation. It's not anything that's like, oh, this is so heavy, although at times it's heavy. But it's an honor to, we represent millions and millions of people who you don't see their faces. You'll never see their faces. You'll never hear their voices. And, just thinking about that is humbling. Mm-hmm. It's humbling. And so for us, we don't have, we can't have the excuse, to just be quiet and shrink back. We have to say things and then take a stand. And sometimes those stands are very unpopular, but they're worth it. Mm-hmm. Look at your little daughter. She's so cute.
She's asking if she can eat the cookie dough in the refrigerator.
Yeah, that's my kind of question.
That's my kind of girl there too.
Yeah.
Well, it is exciting what is happening in the White House, how the administration is stepping out boldly for life, doing something about it more than we've seen from any other administration in history. I will say that not only does the White House appreciate all that you're doing, but so do the rest of us in the pro-life movement. You're for sure, without a doubt, making a difference, going against the norm, as you mentioned, in the Black community. But I appreciate it because there's no doubt that you are changing hearts and minds on the issue of abortion, and in an incredible way. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for sharing your heart and just all that you're doing. Keep it up. There are so many of us that will continue to pray for you and pray you up when you go out and share your story and be bold for life. So.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for having me. I know it's been a little chaotic with the baby and you probably heard a lot of noises and everything else. But
we love those.
We're pro-life. This is how we are. You know,
exactly.
We got our babies, we got our kids. And this is kind of actually probably how everyone is right now because of COVID. And we're all home trying to, make the most of it, being at home. Yeah. But I'm really grateful I was able to share. And if anybody if anyone is watching and they have any questions for me, they can contact me on Facebook, Christina Bennett, on Instagram, Black Pro-Life Woman, Twitter, Black Pro-Life Woman, and my website is ChristinaBennett.com. So if anybody wants to talk more, I'm always open to doing that. The baby actually fell asleep.
Just as we're wrapping up,
I know.
He knew we needed to hear his little
noises.
Yeah.
He always falls asleep when I'm on. It's funny because I notice that whenever I'm like on a Zoom call or something, like he'll fall asleep. But he did just eat, so he just the bottle is empty. So.
Well, it kind of makes it real. You're sitting there holding your son, and we're fighting for his life. We're fighting for lives like his. And so it's just fun to be able to see literally what we're fighting for, why we're doing this. So thanks so much for coming on. I would encourage whoever's listening to definitely reach out to Christina. I'm sure that she has so much more to share, and she is such an encouragement to so many people in the pro-life movement, and will be to you as well. If you enjoyed this, join me next week for my next guest as we highlight someone else who is stepping out boldly for things that matter, and stepping out of their comfort zone for injustice, to fight injustice. And so subscribe to this podcast, Called to Be Bold, and join me next week. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Called to Be Bold, Episode 5, featuring Christina Bennett. You can find out more information about Christina at our website, www.christinabennett.com. Called to Be Bold was created and is presented by Claire Culwell. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Keep up with Claire on her social media at Claire Culwell, and sign up for our latest updates at www.claireculwell.com.